Hey, nice to have you with us. Mansfield today on a Thursday, and that means it's time to go traveling. And a bit of a different take on travel today because usually we find out about lodges and hotels and all the rest of it. But we thought, let's speak to somebody who is a traveler. And that's what she almost does professionally. You'll probably remember her, speaking about Vivian Vermaak, from the SABC3 show Going Nowhere Slowly. Viv, hi, nice to have you with us on Mansfield today.
It's so awesome to see you, Jeremy. It's been a long time for me. I used to listen to you, but to see you now in this new format is fantastic.
Thank you very much. Viv, let's go back in time here, firstly. Where did this all start, Going Nowhere Slowly? How did it start?
Nepotism, Jeremy, as many things do. My cousin came up with the idea of doing a show on old cars because he had a love for old cars. And they tried professional presenters to start with, and the show didn't resonate. So he just thought, who do I know that people laugh at, with, or near, and that people might find eccentric? And luckily or unluckily enough, it was me. So that's how I got onto the show, and I somehow struck a chord, and I was the longest running and presenter on the show, and the most loved and the most hated, obviously.
But now, Viv, have you always been a person who wanted to travel?
Not really, and also never been a person to be in front of television either. I'm a very internal person and in my own head, a very intellectual person. So for me, that show, people often ask me, what was it like? What are the highlights? And for me, for coming from where I was and who I am, that show was riding on a roller coaster without those little seatbelts on, standing upright naked. So that was what that show to me was. And I think, to my cousin's credit, he knew that that show might have such an effect on me because everything was new to me, even having to share of myself on camera. So everything was new and fantastic and horrible.
Yeah, those are mixed emotions, I would imagine, eh?
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Now, listen, what's happened to those old cars?
Look, we used to travel in quite a few of them, and our favorite one was the Chili Pepper. She was a 66 Chevy Impala pillarless, and there was another one, the Big Red, that was a bit more sophisticated car. They're all dead now, or the latest one, the Chili Pepper, has been bought and pimped. Just by scandalous, the car is now white. But I still have a 69. Yeah, no, it's terrible. So I still have a 69 Impala, and she's called Katy Perry. And I still take her for a drive every now and again. And I think the part of the allure of traveling, or the way that we did it, it wasn't necessarily where you went, it's how you went. So you can take the same journey, and I sometimes, if I'm adventurous, I take the car to work. And that will change your entire perception of a road that you've traveled hundreds of times. Because what you do not want in an old car like that, for instance, Katy Perry stalling in the middle of the rain, and wipers don't work. So you have to, in the middle of peak hour traffic at the Gululi's interchange, make a plan. And the plan is take off your T-shirt and you become your own windscreen wiper. And the place you've traveled on the N3 a million times before suddenly become a huge adventure. And I think that's what the show got right, was to tell people travel is anywhere that's not on your doorstep, depending on how you do it.
Yeah, it's very often not the destination, but it's the journey that actually makes the travel the interesting part of it.
Correct. I think the hardest part of travel is to allow yourself to experience it at the very moment it's happening. And the trick to that is to not have expectations, because if you go into any trip, doesn't matter whether it is to work in an old car or a new car, and your expectation is that it will go a certain way, and if it doesn't, the trip has failed, you're missing the point. It has to fail, it has to be exciting, it has to be unusual, and you have to allow yourself to open the door to whatever you're feeling at the time. And that is a trick. It sounds simple, but it's not actually as simple as that.
Okay, let's get into some of your favorite places that you've been to. Let's start in South Africa. What are some of your highlights of places that you've been to in South Africa?
So I'm philosophically avoiding concepts like highlight or happy or joy, because one must avoid happiness and joy at all costs. Like I said, it presupposes your experience of a place. But I think the unrelenting differences of the places is what I can call something valuable. And if it's in South Africa, let's say close to South Africa, Namibia has to take it. I'm somewhere including Namibia, because for some of us it's still a province, that Namibia is so startlingly different and vast. And if you haven't experienced it before, it is a very overwhelming place to be. So I'm going to trade highlight for overwhelming. Is that acceptable?
That's
I
absolutely
found that the most overwhelming, and I think therefore the most valuable. I mean, you can travel there. Luckily for us, the chili pepper had a raised suspension and we put in an extra big tank, because if you want to go to Solitaire, you'll run out of petrol. But you just travel, there's never-ending roads, and nothing happens, but the shifts in the nothingness are so tiny that you become lost in it. And eventually end up in a place called Solitaire, which is in the middle of nowhere. And there's this guy that makes apple pie with cream, and it's the best apple pie with cream you've ever tasted. And he runs a festival there. And then I took part in the boktrol spoeg competition, which is, of course, not something you would do every day. And as it happens, my front tooth fell out, and I spooked the boktrol, and it got stuck in the hole in my tooth. And all of these things are so weird, and it's on camera, and people are looking at you, and wat soek die vrou met die drol in haar tande, but it's fantastic. So yeah, so I don't recommend book droll and you're sucking on a book droll, but on the other hand, it's actually not as bad as you think. So I think for maybe it was a highlight just for the intensity of the engagement of the place.
Yeah, there are some there are some places that resonate with people in different forms and for different reasons. I mean, I know, for example, and I know you've traveled outside South Africa quite a bit as well, but the area from Livingston to Sesheke in Zambia, across to Katimamulilo in Namibia, to Kasane in Botswana, to Vic Falls in Zimbabwe. That whole area there, to me, is one of the most spectacularly beautiful areas of Africa that I've traveled around.
Absolutely, and I do hope that lockdown has given people the opportunity to think of our neighboring countries as debaterland, because that is truly extraordinary. You're talking about the Chobe River and those experiences that you cannot believe all of this is possible, to absorb all of this beauty in the space of a few hours, like you said. And it's really, it's right there. It's driving distance. People should just go and make use of the opportunity to enjoy what's closer to them.
Yeah. Other places in Africa that you've been to? Because you've been to Botswana and Zimbabwe.
So Botswana, Malawi, Zambia, obviously Namibia. Yeah. I think Tanzania, and I know I felt very bad at the time for saying this, but if, as an African country, Tanzania has just extraordinary things, like in Ngorongoro Crater and Kilimanjaro and Dar es Salaam and Zanzibar. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, South Africa is but Tanzania is outrageous in terms of what it can offer you, and that curious blend of old world and new world, and just the size and majesty of the place. So Tanzania was definitely a highlight. And if you engage in activities like climbing Kilimanjaro, which is also stupid, to be honest, it's a ridiculous thing to just go. I mean, what? Daar trek jy nou op en jy gaan amper dood, maar jy klim die mountain. But when you engage in things like that are so primal and so ridiculous and so difficult, you come back differently. And I think that's the value of travel, as much as it's anywhere that's outside your doorstep. When you go to a thing, a place, or an activity which challenges like that, you come back transcended. And I think travel brings you that easier than sitting at home watching Netflix.
Now, are you an adventurous traveler? Because you seem a bit hesitant about that sort of aspect.
I'm intrepid, let's call it that. That's a better word, that I will proceed even past my hesitancy or my lack of courage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you ever, because one of the things I've always wanted to do is go on a coin trip where you get to an area and you've got to make a decision, so you flip a coin, you go heads or tails. Heads we go left, tails we go right. Bang. And that's where, so you have absolutely no plan whatsoever. You just you go on a trip and you just find out where you end up.
It can be fun. We did that for going very slowly most of the time, and a lot of the time that was not part of the fun, but it ended up being part of the adventure, because people don't realize when it looked unscripted, it was unscripted. And we slept in places we didn't intend to, because none of us could read a map. So there is, for me, the fact that you're doing it like flip a coin is not as much fun as surviving it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But the flipping of the coin part is not as exciting to me as it sounds like to you.
Would you do it again?
Not in that, I don't think in that fashion. I don't think in that fashion, because the novelty of it is the adventure of it. And I think the novelty of it to all of us was so precious and so sacred that to remake it would spoil the memory. So no, I wouldn't do it again. For the sake of preserving the holiness of that cult following that the show got.
Is there anywhere that you have a yearning to go to? Anywhere in Africa or in the world? Or?
Not that, but I'll tell you what is on my list. An astounding trip that you can do at home or wherever. I'm very interested in psychedelics, and I'll tell you why. Because the point that I make about travel is that sometimes you have to be beyond yourself to find yourself, or to appreciate a place or an event that you can transcend where you are. And I think the evolutionary value and psychological value of psychedelics in traveling into yourself is very valuable, and I'm very curious about that. Now, if I can combine that with a plane like Hogsback or Kilimanjaro or a mountain, first prize, but that's my next planned trip.
Is inside yourself.
100%.
Vivian from Mark, thank you very much for taking time out to join us on Mansfield today. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
appreciate it.
Thank you.
There we go. So there's her next journey. Where's yours? Let's get traveling, South Africa. Until next time, thank you for being with us, and goodbye.